So I remember when I first joined a Unitarian Universalist congregation. It was all 18 years ago. And I had been so excited because my very first Sunday there, I saw on their little announcements page that there was an upcoming class, Exploring UU and Path to Membership, if someone was interested in joining. And even though it was my first time, I had that feeling, yes, this was a place for me. And so I went to the Pathway to Membership class. And All Souls, it was in a little bit of a growth spurt, so there were 88 of us there.
Oh my God.
And we looked around, and it was just like, we all circled a couple times in a row, like in this big thing, and they were like, well, welcome, because you didn't have to RSVP in advance. And they kind of just went ahead with what they did, which was, please introduce yourself and share why you're excited about All Souls. And we went around, and it was so wonderful to hear all these different stories. And even though I wasn't learning about the congregation per se, I was really learning about the congregation. I was learning about the community that would shape me, inform me, and that I would be part of. And so it takes a long time, especially when people get warmed up, to introduce themselves and share why they're making this leap of commitment into a faith community. And so the 2 hours were up by the time we finished introducing ourselves. And they were like, okay, well, normally we have a whole agenda, and you would learn about how to get involved. And so as we were putting on their coats, this moment of panic came across the facilitators' faces. And they said, if you're gonna join anything next, do Roots and Wings, and before you go, we need you to fill out a pledge card. And they're like, don't go, and they're literally like, don't go, don't leave, fill out a pledge card. And I was shocked. I was totally shocked because I was completely unchurched, and I didn't have any idea, I literally had zero idea, that you would make have any intentional planning around any financial gifts to a church. I thought, you just pass the basket and you feel generously moved, and that's how you gave. And so I sat there with this card in my hand, asking me what I would give in that year. 2005, I was 25, and I sat there, and my inner New Yorker really settled in. I see some laughs of recognition. So my inner New Yorker was like, I don't want my new church to think I'm cheap. Right? I don't want them to think I'm cheap, and I don't want to get taken. What is the real sweet spot of the average gift? So I did some calculating, and I thought, what do I give to yoga? Okay, and I thought, $375 a year. That is the sweet spot. And they even said they were nice. It was February, and they're like, it's 2 months of the year has passed, so if you want to think in an annual amount, you can, or if you want to think for 10 months, that's fine too. And I thought, okay. Gave it, and I thought, I feel pretty good. And then jump ahead, because I'm one of those people. So 9 months later, I'm an officer on the board. And All Souls in DC does what we're doing this month. They have an annual pledge drive where they ask each person to thoughtfully think ahead about what the church means to them and what resources they have to give, and to write that commitment down on paper so the people who make the budgets can understand what budget we could afford. And I'll tell you, those 6 months made a huge deal of difference. And so I took a different tact. This time, I thought about all the different things I did with the church, and I began to assign a monetary value to them. And so I thought, oh, come. So I began to tally. Okay, the service is about an hour. It has live music and a sermon. A movie is $10, but it's 2 hours, but it's live, so I think $10 a service is good. That's $520 a year. Then I also took a class on Emerson and developing your own theology, and this other course, and those were really valuable, and so a community college course would cost me this much, so I'll add those in. And I was doing yoga, but at a discounted price. So I was like, oh, you know, I'll add that in a little bit more too. And I came to $1,500, and I was like, whoa. Now, I also thought about what I could afford to give. And so I put $1,100 down. And that was about 4.5% of my gross income at that time. And it was about nearly 7% of my net income. And I was like, wow, I'm not even giving like cost. But it was a big chunk. And I was happy to write it down and to really take actually the time just to think about all that I was receiving from this congregation. And then 2 months later, the head volunteer of the Stewardship Pledge Drive, a man named Mark Ewart, who is actually the consultant helping us with our financial stewardship here today, he came back and he said, we had a strong pledge drive, but we have a gap. We didn't have enough money in our pledge to meet the budget that we think is really necessary to fulfill our mission. And so we have a gap, and it's about a 10% gap. And the stewardship team is coming to the board and saying, would you each increase your pledge by 10%? Would you do that and then lead the way and say, the board believes in this, and we're going to model for the congregation our level of commitment? And I increased my pledge another 10%. And I thought, I am just so grateful for this congregation and for being on the board. Paula Cole-Jones, who's one of the leaders in our denomination, was on that board, and I thought, how amazing that I, 25, get to sit next to her and learn her way of being, but also what church leadership means by her side. And so I increased my pledge, and about 6 months later, I realized I couldn't afford it. I was like just a little short each month, and I was like, ooh, I just can't go in the red. And so when I lowered my pledge again, the staff was professional and courteous and kind. And what it said to me was, boy, if I yearn to give more. I can't give more, but that yearning gap was important for me to recognize. It said to me, I had really moved into a place of appreciation, thinking about what I had received from the congregation, and then giving back in return instead of what I was getting from the congregation. It was from receiving to getting I shifted. Not that long after that, about a year later, I filled out another pledge card to All Souls. And All Souls had this practice of asking people to put down what percentage of their income their pledge represented. And I had gotten a call about my pledge card from a volunteer who said, I was calling about your pledge because it says here that you're giving 33% of your income. And my pledge had dropped in half, and I explained that it was 33% of my income. I was shortly leaving my job. I had saved up money to go backpacking. And I thought, if I could save up my money for an investment to go backpacking in Asia for 7 months, I could also have enough money to support my church during that time as well. And so I made sure that I gave them 11% of what I'd saved from my trip, which was about 33% of my small amount of earnings for that year. And they went, oh, okay. And they were like, that's really interesting. They were just wondering how someone who could give so little was also giving so much. So then I moved to Indianapolis, and it was time for my family to make our pledge as like the ministerial family. And now the pledge was really, my position shifted, so I always let my husband from thereafter really decide what our pledge would be. And we put down $2,600, which were 5%, and I said, that's what it would be, sweetie, because at 5% is like a leadership level of giving. I really believe in that. And he said, $2,600, that's just not enough. Like, we have to give more. Like, let's give $3,000, let's go a little bit more. What you do and what this church does is just too important. And when our income increased, we increased it to $5,500, and we felt good about what we could give. And then Kent lost his job. And that rocked our world so incredibly. And one of the things we had to think about was, could we stay in Indy? Would our whole life have to change? And as a result, we moved back here to the East Coast and to this congregation, which ended up being a huge gift, but at the time, we had no idea what the future was going to hold. And he got another job, but there was a $60,000 income gap for us. And I said, should we talk about the pledge? And he looked at me and he goes, the church is too important. Let's maintain our pledge. And we did that for another whole year, and we managed it, and it was hard. And a year after, we lowered it because we just couldn't sustain that longer. But I remember thinking, of all the things to cut, we thought the church should be the very last place that we would sacrifice. So I'll be honest with you. The New Yorker in me never really gets out. And when I was considering a move back here, I did a little calculation of cost of living adjustments, and our disposable income or our cost of living went down 35%. And things are just more expensive here, like our childcare expenses are 3 to 6 times more expensive than in Indianapolis. And we have 2 kids versus 1 and all of those things. And so I still feel that yearning gap, right? Here's what I could give, we feel it, we notice it, we look at our budgets, it's tight, and we want to give more. And I respect that yearning gap in me and hope that it will, things will change. And so we look for other ways. So one of the things that we did was, we realized with a little bit of help that if we just paid a little bit more and shifted Kent's healthcare elsewhere, we could save the church $5,000. We're like, well, that's a way that we could help. But I'll tell you, in all these ways that have shifted from what's the sweet spot to what am I really getting, to how much I'm receiving, to this is my community no matter what, and I want to support it absolutely as generously as I can. I always thought about the people that made the difference, how it formed me and shifted me in my values, and what the church was doing to help change the world. But the generosity path, the people asking me for money, people I was in relationship asking me for money, had a much greater impact than what I just give to the church. In fact, it informed how I give to every other location as well. If I wasn't a member of a UU church, I don't know that I would have supported NPR or have a monthly contribution to the Environmental Defense Fund, or give money to UU Ministry for Earth, or the Unitarian Universalist Association, or the Fresh Air Fund, or the Children's Defense Fund. or support a Children's Defense Fund Freedom School. All of those other organizations were one that I thought about. What is their mission? What's their connection to me? What change am I funding to see happen in the world? And so in short, without our congregations, I never would have thought about what my money, how my money was a means of expressing my values. But I have one last story to talk about my generosity path. And that was in 2016, I got a call from someone at the Unitarian, this congregation's prison ministry. And they said they were starting an effort to try to get one of the men in the prison that we work with released on parole. And would I write a letter of support to the parole board? And I said, absolutely. And I'll tell you in truth, I'd been waiting for this call for a long time. And kind of as an aside, the person said, it's kind of expensive, so we're making do, but like, we don't know that we have the money. And my mother had died when I was the intern here. And after several years, I finally received my inheritance. And I thought about this prison ministry, which is so transformative. I hope that you'll consider coming on Wednesdays to their nonviolent communication class here, and then joining with our prison ministry. And I thought about in particular what this one man meant to me, because when I was grieving my mother, he helped me so much. And so I decided to give from my inheritance $5,000 to this legal fund. I had never written a check like that before. And I didn't know if the legal efforts would be successful, but it didn't matter, because what mattered is giving to who you love. Giving to whom you love. Giving generously as a form of love. So to close, I want to have this reading by Isabel Allende. And she writes, I have lived with passion and in a hurry, trying to accomplish too many things. I never had time to think about my beliefs until my 28-year-old daughter, Paula, fell ill. She was in a coma for a year, and I took care of her at home until she died in my arms in December of 1992. Paralyzed and silent in her bed, my daughter Paula taught me a lesson that is now my mantra. You only have what you give. The pain of losing my child was a cleansing experience. I had to throw overboard all excess baggage and keep only what is essential. Because of Paula, I didn't cling to anything anymore. Now I like to give much more than to receive. I'm happier when I love more than when I am loved. I adore my husband, my son, my grandchildren, my mother, my dog, and frankly, I don't even know if they even like me. But who cares? Loving them is my joy. Give, give, give. What is the point of having experience, knowledge, or talent if I don't give it away? Of having stories if I don't tell them to others? Of having wealth if I don't share it? I don't intend to be cremated with any of it. It is in giving that I connect with others and with the world and with the divine. It is in giving that I feel the spirit of my daughter inside of me, like a soft presence. Let us hope that we grow in our practices of generosity and give, give, give to all whom we love. May it be so, and amen.